Because what happens, I took the stress and the pressure out. I made this piece of wood be able to fold back down. When that happens, the kerf is going to try to close on the bottom a little bit. So the reason I run it the second time, and I usually put something over it to help hold it just as flat as I can as I go through, is to make sure my kerf is even in width. But let's look at the one that's really cupped. And like I said, I'm using a piece of plywood, but it works the same on a piece of solid wood. Now, I'm just going to hit this about the center. It immediately laid right back down, but it's going to create me a little bit of a hump here, hump here. Is there anything I can do it now? I need to run it again. So let's watch. Now, I probably should have run them both other two twice, but I'm just going to show you. Here's what I've created. Now, I'm a little deep on this plywood, but here's the point. I've not disturbed my surface, and I've got it down flat. Now, what do? Now, the way I do this is I simply go to a nice flat level surface, clamp it down flat, rip me a spline, glue it in place. And we'll come back and look at that. Now here's where it's going to create you an issue. Like I said, this is a last resort thing, but if you've got something where you're doing a raised panel, you're going to have an issue. And that is the spline's going to show in the end. If you've got something relatively straight grained and whatever, it's not going to make a huge difference. But in that case, we've all done this. Probably the best thing to do, if you absolutely have to, is go ahead and just do a full cut. Because that way you can bring everything back, you can just glue it all back together. But here's the cool thing about the spline. And we're going to come back, I'm going to cut some, I'm going to make me some strips to go in here, and I'm going to show it to you. We'll be right back. All right, guys, I got my splines made. All I did was rip me some strips. Want them to fit in here nicely, but they don't, you know, I don't want to have to drive them in. I want some room for a little bit of room for the glue. And you may have to sand a little bit or whatever the case. This is where, remember, we didn't go back through it. It'll do that. Now here's the thing I want you to understand, is when we glue this spline in, right here, in order for this to cup any further, it's literally got to, number one, we've taken the stress out. The second thing we've done is we've actually broken its back, if you will. Meaning this thing, in order for this to go that way and that to go the other way, it's actually got to separate that glue joint. And that's just not going to happen. Now here's another thing. I usually, when I do this, I usually take a little, I prefer a polyurethane glue. The reason I do that is that the polyurethanes don't put as much moisture down inside that wood. Now, the other thing I like is I like a glue that dries hard. Plastic resins, you know, Type Bond 3, any of them. something dries hard. The yellow glues have a tendency to dry just a little bit more, a little softer. They're a little bit more elastic. Now, when I glue it, what I'll do is I clamp it down, get it down flat, glue them in, simply stick me a couple cawls across it to hold everything in. Now again, out on my website, there's my blog. And if you go out there and look, there's some pictures of this where we actually did some cabinet doors. That's where all of this came from. So that's the way you can handle it. Like I said, unfortunately, it's part of life and it's the way things are. But you've got to keep wood balanced. It has to be that way. Whatever you do to one side, do to the other. Like I said, cutting a spline in it is kind of a, well, it's kind of major surgery and something you would prefer not to do. But when you have to, you have to. I'm Charles Neal. Catch you later.